Hey everyone, this episode contains discussion that some viewers may find disturbing. If you are affected by anything that we talk about on today's show, you can find links for support in the description.
So basically, a disturbing video was circulated on social media in which a woman was alerted by her younger sister intercepted a man in Mitcham, South London, who was attempting to abduct an 11-year-old girl on her way to school. Recording from her phone, the woman basically followed the man and she can be heard questioning him until he eventually walks away, leaving the girl crying and clearly distressed. It is understood that she had already been sexually assaulted, and following the appeal, the police have now arrested the man. The community has taken it upon themselves to begin patrolling the neighbourhood before and after school, but what steps do we need to take and what conversations do we need to have with children to prevent incidents like this from happening?
This is a tough one, because I saw the video kind of, I stumbled across it. Let me say that. I stumbled across the video and I think I watched it and I was actually very, very disturbed by it. I didn't think I would be. But in terms of what we can do to prevent it, I think one of the first things is understanding that we are never going to be able to prevent it completely. There is nothing that we are going to be able to do to eradicate it. And I think that's one of the hardest things. As with any issue or crime that we have in any country, we're never going to be able to eradicate it completely, and then we have to talk then probably more so about prevention rather than eradication. And I think in terms of children, I think a lot of it stems with education. And I would probably just talk about one thing because there's probably a lot that you guys want to say, but one of the things would be boundaries and letting children know that it's okay to say no, that they don't like something, that they don't always have to be polite and kind, because I think we really drill into children. And I think especially, can I say black children, ethnic minority children? I don't know if I can say that. Let me speak for myself then, and people who I know growing up, people that I know, there's a heavy, I wouldn't say pressure, but you have to be polite to your elders. You have to be respectful, get up if they tell you to, do this, do that. And what we're really doing sometimes is eroding children's boundaries. So if they're not happy or comfortable with something, we tell them, if it's an adult telling you, you need to listen to it. But we need to allow children and educate them to, if it doesn't feel okay, if you're not happy, if you don't want to do something, it is okay to say no, I don't want to. It's not all right. For me, that would be one of the things.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good start. I was completely disturbed by the video and I knew that I would be, but I said to myself I wasn't going to watch it because even reading the words was enough. So I just clicked on the article to read about it. But then, when the videos load quite quickly and it just loaded, it was on my screen and then I watched it. And then I'm not going to lie, guys, I cried for the rest of the day. Like I cried for the whole night and I was just like, so distraught from it, which is why whenever we talk about things, we talked a couple of episodes ago about SARS and I was like, yeah, I've been avoiding the videos because this is what happens to me. But the way that I see problems is like an iceberg, and I think the tip of the iceberg is what we saw in the video, or worse. But obviously problems aren't birthed from the top, they're birthed from the base. So then when we talk about prevention, I'm thinking, okay, we prevent something by figuring out what created it to begin with. And I think with scenarios like this, I think it's very easy to get outraged at what this man did to this child. But how outraged are you when you see everyday rape culture, everyday casual rape culture in your friendship groups at work, and you say nothing? All of these things lead to something as outrageous as what that man did, but it starts all the way over here. And that's what I think we don't always pay attention to. And so I'd like to say, obviously no one is safe from assault, like whether you're like an adult or a child, a senior, or, a boy or a girl or whatever. Like no one is safe from assault, but I'm just going to speak in terms of men and women because it's easier to form the sentences that way for now. But us like women, we can sit here and we can talk about this until we're blue in the face, and we can talk about it articulately, and we can talk about it passionately. But the kind of man who disregards a woman to the point where he's going to harm her is not going to hear a word that's coming out of my mouth. So just like I expect, I'm always talking about white allies, just like how I expect white allies to hold their racist white friends or racist white acquaintances and racist white family members accountable, and just like how I expect us cisgendered people to hold transphobic people accountable, I'm expecting men to call out rape culture when they see it happen with other men that they respect, with other men that they don't like, other men that are their bosses, other men that are their brothers, their dads. Like, you need to be open enough to have this conversation about how dominance is a applauded trait to have as a male. It's almost an expected part of your masculinity. And we need to talk about how we teach men that sex is something that they're entitled to, and what happens when you are denied something that you're entitled to. You just take the thing. So we need to talk about this from the beginning, because yes, it's brilliant to be, patrolling your neighborhoods to try and prevent children interacting with pedophiles, but how are we eradicating pedophiles to begin with?
I think you've brought up some really good points, and you articulated it very well. And I think I, couldn't have said it any better, because although I posed the question to you lovely ladies, I don't know if talking to the children is the prevention. Do you know what I mean? Because they're the victim. Like, they're the victim. I mean, you can always tell children to be vigilant and do as much as they can. But if somebody wants to pose a threat to someone, that's exactly what they're going to do. And so there needs to be a conversation. And when I was thinking about, okay, you're going to have the conversation with people who are the hardest way to say, I guess, is the perpetrators, the people that have done this. But it's like, at what point do you know somebody's going to be a perpetrator to engage them in this kind of conversation to not do it? So I was really helpful that you brought up, Luanda, like, maybe we need to start at the beginning. It starts with all the small things, and then it snowballs into all the big things. And I think maybe that's when people are children, the conversations have to start coming up about consent and being appropriate and the value of people's bodies and things like that. Because I think, like, in school, they obviously give you sex education and tell you kind of, how it works. And then at home, depending on your parent, they'll talk to you about responsibility and how that works. But the conversation about consent and protecting yourself and no means no, and who's appropriate to be with in regards to age and things like that, that's a wider conversation that needs to happen. And I can't speak for parents all over the world, but I can just say that, pretty much for me, that conversation was never had. But I don't know for other people's parents, is that being had? Is that conversation being told? And I think with kids, it's just, you have to tell them to be vigilant. But as I said, people are going to pose threats if they want to or not. When I was thinking, like, proactively, what could have been done differently, you always think, okay, well, we can have people patrolling, but then we've got to also think about, well, who are these people patrolling? And I hate to be like that paranoid, but it's like, you can't just show up with a vest and say to me, yeah, I'm patrolling, save the kids, but I don't know you if you're another threat and you're just posing to be somebody who's going to protect me. Like, do you know what I mean? So that's why I feel like, okay, you've got the school governing bodies, you've got all the PTAs, community support officers, people with a bit more authority, maybe they should be the ones patrolling, not to stop the community, though, from doing what they're doing. But I think right now it's about having the right people and also having the right conversations at the right time, because I guess intervention's better than prevention or whatever they call it. So maybe these conversations need to start happening when they're younger. But I'm also horrified at the thought of, if I had one, like a 10-year-old little brother or 10-year-old little sister, this and that, like, I'm horrified to have that kind of conversation with them, because personally for me, this kind of stuff shouldn't be introduced to them this young, but they have to also be made aware to protect themselves. So it's kind of like, where do you start and where do you stop?
I think for me, you have to start really early when it comes to children. And I think you're right, Anissa, it's not fair. Unfortunately, we live in a world that is just unjust and very unfair, because I agree with Luanda in the sense that a lot of education needs to be had, and a lot of it needs to be had by men. to understand what consent is, what sexual assault is, what adulthood is. Just because a girl has a developed body at the age of 13 does not mean that she is grown enough to be entering something with you by whether she thinks she's consenting or not. Let me just make that clear, because some young girls, and I've been a young girl whose body developed very early and had grown men approaching me, and you feel like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm attractive to people who are older. That's cool. It's not. And I'm very fortunate that something like that didn't happen, because men are told that if she looks like a woman and has the body of a woman, then it's fair game. I think in terms of children, my mum had the conversation with me when I was young, because she knew, and there were people in our family who had been sexually assaulted. So she was very much on, if someone has done something, feel free to come and talk to mummy, this and because when we're saying, oh, your 10-year-old brother, like you said, Anissa, sometimes at that point, something has already happened to a lot of people. And sometimes because it's uncomfortable for us, we don't want to broach it, but this child could be suffering in silence. And as Luanda said again, patrolling is all great, but the majority of people, children, are assaulted by people that they know. So it's not usually going to be someone on the street who's going to try and kidnap you, although we see it happens and it's disgusting. A lot of people are assaulted by friends of family, and other children. And that's why there's a need to talk to children and maybe share your own story. They said, use the media and say, oh, you see that happening there when he kisses her? She said she was okay with it. And it's okay if someone says that. And or talking about, body parts, and not being ashamed to call your child's body parts their vagina or their penis, or to have those conversations so that you can say, if someone touches your penis, then say, and it's not mummy or daddy or the doctor and one of us is there, then it's not okay. And you can tell me that, because if we don't start to train it into children to talk about these things, then how are we ever going to be comfortable to talk about it in society? And in terms of paedophiles, I don't even know if paedophiles can be, and I have no basis for saying this, but I don't know if they can be educated out of it, because I think that there is something very wrong there that is going on. I think that there is something going on that is wrong for you to be attracted to a child as an adult. And I'm talking about prepubescent children. Again, if the body's developed, you can be fooled into thinking that someone's older than they are. But for a child, I don't think that's normal. As I've gotten older, I like guys that are my age. Do you know what I mean? So
yes, I do.
I don't even know if education would help them. Not that I'm saying that we shouldn't, but I think that there's other things going on there that have just gone completely wrong.
Yeah, I think there's so many things to factor in when we're looking at someone who's all the way there. Like I after watching that video, I was thinking about that man, and I was thinking, you make all these presumptions about them. I'm thinking probably you're having a rough time at home. You probably aren't, I'm just making all these things in my head to why someone would do that. But it's interesting that you say that, because this is exactly why I kind of go to the beginning instead of thinking like, oh, how do we fix you? I'm thinking, how do we not make any more of you? Because we are a society that has allowed you to exist. So we all need to look at ourselves as a collective to stop this from happening again. And that's why
can you break down what you mean by allowing them to exist? Because I guess for me, I have a trouble with paedophiles in terms of nature and nurture, as in, were they born that way, or did society allow an environment for them? So just because I don't understand what you mean, because that's where I struggle, not by saying, oh, it's too late for them, but I'm like, were they born that way, or was it society
or were they made that way?
Led them down that path. So what did you mean by that specifically?
Okay, so in terms of paedophiles and nature and nurture, I can't say I know enough to comment on that. But when I see a man like that, I don't just see it as paedophilia. Like, I see that as misogyny. I see that as toxic masculinity. I don't think that he is solely abusive to just younger women. I'm sure if we found women that were his age in his life, how is he treating them as well? Do you see what I mean? So I think they all fall into different issues that we should all bear the responsibility of cutting out from day dot. Like, as an example, I had a friend who, we went to a house party and I didn't stay over. And then, you know, when you message your friend, like, oh, what happened the next day and stuff, just because I'm wondering, you know, if I missed anything. And she said that she was standing in the kitchen and then someone walked up to her and then just like smacked her ass, like really hard, really loudly. And she was really uncomfortable with it, which is why she messaged me, because she knew that I would agree that she had every right to be. And, you know, my first question was, what did everyone else do? Like, we were there with friends. What did your friends do? And she said they laughed, like everyone just found it funny. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say that we need to cut it out from day dot, because that, even though someone's going to see that as so small, and if I was in that scenario, I would have said something and then I would have been the person killing the mood, and I would have been, you know, the politically correct one and blah, blah, blah. And it's just banter. I'll be that person all day, every day. I don't care, first of all. But that's just my point exactly, because we're downplaying people's right to their own body. Like, if you've just touched someone and you did it harm, and you did it on like her ass, it's like she's uncomfortable with that, and you're telling her that she's not allowed to be because you want to laugh at it. That's day zero. So then that kind of mindset, when we're allowing this to be acceptable, that develops into something else. That develops to, like, you know, kissing a girl when she's too drunk, and then maybe sleeping with her and she can't remember the next day. And it just goes into all of these things to the point where, like I said in my first statement, we are teaching men that they are entitled to sex. We are teaching men that they are entitled to women's body. And when someone denies you a thing that you feel you're entitled to, you will just take it. And that's why we need to start from birth and sort it out from fresh out the womb.
I hear what you're saying, Luanda, but I almost, like, hearing what you're saying almost to me also feels like two different causes, and I don't know how to make that make sense to you. Like, I'm trying to make it sense in my mind, because when I'm thinking of, like, those kinds of things, like the smacking of the ass and the kissing drunk girls and sex and things, like, for me, that's all, like, sexually deviant behaviour. And not that paedophilia isn't sexually deviant behaviour, but I feel like you're almost shot with two different arrows on that one. Like, the children bit, that's where it, like, throws me, because it's one thing to be sexually deviant to an adult, but it's a whole other level to bring it to children. And so that's why I'm kind of like, I once again don't know enough to say if it's you're born with it or if you're introduced to it or kind of socialized into it. I just think that wherever we can stop it, we should stop it. But I almost feel like they're two different bags. Us that make sense?
I think it's really interesting what you say there, Anissa. And to be honest, us separating it into two categories is what really allows it to continue, because we look at some forms of sexual assault as worse than others. So for me, I've been slapped on the ass by guys before in the past or whatever. Sometimes I made a big deal about it. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm growing up in a time now when I'm starting to realize actually it's all sexual assault. And if I don't call out this type of sexual assault, then when I talk about this, you're not going to understand what the problem is. Not everybody who's going to slap somebody on the backside is going to rape someone. Not saying that whatsoever. But the same way that I've seen it in TV and media since I was a child, like, you know, she said no, but she really wanted it, blah, blah, blah. And by the end, she's very happy and she had an orgasm and, you know, it was a great time for everybody. It sends mixed messages about consent. And consent is always two ways. And when it's not two ways, it's assault. And we have a problem with calling things that are smaller, which we deem smaller. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. Yeah. If a guy, like you said, accidentally touched my breast, happened before, would I see that sexual assault and report it to the police? No, I wouldn't. But then if I'm not saying this is sexual assault, I didn't want it, you did it on purpose, it's assault. It allows the environment for it to happen. So we have to call out all of it. We have to put it all in one big bubble so that, I don't know if people are afraid, because again, like we said, it's going to happen, but people are more aware of when they're feeling violated and can say, I don't want it. And that's why I was so big at the beginning about saying no, because like your friend Luanda, when these things happen, I've been there. We've laughed. It's funny. No, she felt bad. She felt like she couldn't say no. And there's a problem there. People need to know that my body is my own, my space is my own, and it has to start from children. We have to tell children to speak up and feel confident in your voice, because that's the way people get older, and sometimes they're in a situation where maybe they felt in their gut that something wasn't right and they could have left with their friend, but they were like, let me not make a big deal about it. No, make a big deal about it. Make a big deal about it. Your voice is valid. Yeah, so...
And you have to do it with your friends as well. Sorry, not to just jump in, but like, and this is probably not only just my issue, but like, I went to an all-girls school, so people just thought because we were all girls it was okay for me to run up and squeeze your breast or smack your bum and things like that. So if they see another person that they deem you to be comfortable with, or another friend do it to you, they're not gonna overreact. But I always overreacted every single time, because my body is my body, and I think you have to set those boundaries. No matter if I know you, no matter if you're my friend, no matter if we're in the same place, no matter if we're having a good time, no matter if I'm drinking, if I don't need to touch my body, you shouldn't. Everyone hands to themselves, people. It's literally, I'm sure your parents teach you that like the first day of nursery. Keep your hands to yourself. Don't touch anyone, don't hit anyone, don't bite anyone. This is what they literally tell you. But somewhere in the middle of it, we all get mixed up. And it's the mixed messages, Sophie, to bring it back full circle.
Real talk. Real. Your hands are your own, your body is your own. Keep them to yourself.